We get you the news and the newsmakers from Africa. From elections to climate change to innovations and opportunities. As the world's attention shifts, we report from Africa, the heart of the global south. Join me every weekday live on First Post. Hello and welcome to First Post Africa, where we get you the top stories from the continent and from across the world. I'm Alyson Grange, coming to you live from Durban, South Africa. First, let's take a look at the headlines. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says the Israeli military will remain in most of Gaza after backing a peace plan for the territory unveiled by US President Donald Trump. Taiwan's foreign minister says it is high time for Europe to stand with the island as both face threats from the authoritarian neighbors during a visit to Poland. Indonesian rescuers raced to find 38 people feared trapped under the rubble of a boarding school in East Java, which collapsed during afternoon prayers, killing at least 3. Flights at Afghanistan's main airport in Kabul have been cancelled as the country reels from a nationwide shutdown of internet and mobile services imposed by the Taliban government. And gold prices dip after hitting a record high, while stock markets are mixed as investors brace for a possible US government shutdown that could delay key job data. Hello and welcome. Our top story today is from Madagascar. President Andry Rajoelina has dissolved his government following days of deadly youth-led protests over water shortages and power cuts. The East African island nation of Madagascar was witnessing its largest protests in years as thousands of Gen Z protesters took to the streets. The rallies were triggered by frustration over frequent power cuts and water scarcity, but soon turned into calls for the president to resign. Now, earlier, President Rajoelina had sacked his energy minister in response to the protests, but continued anger on the streets prompted him to dissolve his entire government.
Therefore, in accordance with Article 54 of the Constitution, I have today taken the decision to dismiss the Prime Minister and dissolve his government. Pending the appointment of the new government, the current government team will continue to serve on an interim basis and handle day-to-day affairs until a new government is appointed.
The United Nations reports at least 22 people were killed in days of protests and more than 100 were injured, although the government has not confirmed these figures. The protests turned violent as police responded with tear gas and rubber bullets to disperse crowds. On Monday, protesters gathered at the university in the capital of Antananarivo and attempted to march through the city centre. However, they were met with a police crackdown.
As soon as we move, we are surrounded. As soon as we speak, we are silenced. What is this? Are we in kindergarten? Are we in kindergarten where when you are told to sit down, we sit down? That's what we're experiencing right now. How many more years are we going to accept this without anything changing? Stand up, we have to change things. If you want something better, you have to fight for it. We all have to stand up and fight.
The protests have been inspired by other Gen Z movements in Kenya and Nepal. The recent rallies in Nepal led to the fall of the government. The movement has also adopted a pirate flag symbol from the Japanese anime series One Piece. The One Piece logo was also used in youth-led anti-regime protests in Nepal as well as Indonesia. Despite the government being sacked, protests have continued to mobilize.
They say we are a TikTok generation, a generation of idiots. And when we rise up, they don't let us speak out about the country's problems. A message for you, Mr. Andry Rajoelina. When you led the protests, they let you do it. It was okay. But when we young people fight for the country, you stop us.
The protests have also been followed by widespread looting. The Gen Z movement claims that anonymous groups were paid to loot businesses to tarnish their movement and undermine the ongoing struggle.
We were peaceful, we were singing, we were chanting, we were saying, give us our rights, the right to live, really. But then some people took advantage of it, and there were others who were rather provocative. I would say they did not follow instructions from Gen Z.
Madagascar, despite its vast natural resources, remains one of the world's poorest countries. According to the World Bank, nearly 75% of the population lived below the poverty line in 2022. The country has experienced frequent popular uprisings since gaining independence from France in 1960. This includes mass protests in 2009 when Rajoelina first came to power through a military-backed coup. He stepped down in 2014, but returned after winning the 2018 election and secured a third term in December of 2023. But the poll was marked by controversy and alleged irregularities. Many in Madagascar remain unhappy with his rule, saying he has failed to deliver on promises. And I quote, "We want to live, not survive." This has become the central slogan of the movement against his rule.
16 years in power. We've given him chance after chance. He makes us drunken promises. All he cares about is himself and his own family. Meanwhile, here we are dying of starvation.
This is yet another protest led by Gen Z, with young people marching for change. But can it deliver the transformation the Malagasy are seeking? For more on this, we will keep you posted. And moving on, let's turn our attention to another Gen Z protest ongoing in Morocco. Young protesters have been rallying across several cities, calling for education and public health reforms. The protests that began on Saturday entered their third day on Monday. Police have arrested dozens of protesters in days of protests. Now, reportedly, the protesters were arrested while they were trying to chant slogans or speak to the press.
حنا كنخرجوا باش نطالبوا بالحقوق ديالنا المشروعه مي تواجهنا بالرفض وبالقمع. سمحوا لي عييت بالجزره حيتاش ما بقاش عندنا الحق نتمشاو في الشارع العام. ما عرفناش علاش تقمعنا سلميا وولينا كنطاردوا من قبل الشرطه وما عندناش الحق نوقفوا في اماكن عامه.
Security forces cracked down on young protesters who were trying to gather in major cities, including the capital of Rabat, Casablanca, Agadir, Tangier, and Houja. Reportedly, the majority of those detained over the weekend were released later. The protests were organized online by a youth group named Gen Z 212, using platforms including TikTok, Instagram, and gaming application Discord. Now, just like Madagascar, protests in Morocco are also quite similar to the Gen Z protests that most recently rocked Nepal, and have also taken place in other African nations like Kenya and Nigeria. Young Moroccans have denounced the government's misplaced priorities. Protesters slammed the government for pouring money into international sporting events while neglecting health and education. This comes as Morocco is preparing to co-host the 2030 FIFA World Cup, along with Spain and Portugal, In the run-up to the 2030 FIFA World Cup, Morocco is building at least 3 new stadiums and is renovating or expanding at least half a dozen others. The North African nation is also set to host the African Cup of Nations later this year.
علاش خارجين خويا حنا ما بغينا لا كره لا والو كره كنت تعطينا عطاتنا شحال هادي عطات للدراري حنا بغينا الصحه والشعب والدينا تيموتوا لينا.
Moroccan human rights body and opposition parties have condemned the crackdown on protesters, calling it an attack on the right to freedom of expression. Moroccans have been angry over social inequalities in the country, which have hit young people and women the hardest. Now, recent reports of the deaths of 8 pregnant women at a public hospital in Agadir have further fueled public outrage.
الناس كيطلبوا مدارس ومستشفيات ما كيطلبوش شي حاجه المستحيله شي حاجه اللي ضروري خصها تكون في المغرب. الناس ما فاهمينش هذا الشيء. فين هي الحكومه في هذا الشيء؟ فين هو اخر نوش اللي مصباح هو كيدوي فين هو شي الناس كيطلبوا شي حاجه اللي ضروريه في المغرب. خاصهم مستشفيات ومدارس راه ما يمكنش واحد.
Earlier this month, survivors of Morocco's 2023 earthquake also rallied in Rabat, demanding the government to rebuild their houses as promised. Public discontent is on the rise in Morocco. Now, young Moroccans want their government to take accountability and to prioritize their basic needs over funding glamorous sporting events. But the government has denied all allegations against it. Gen Z protests have already led to the collapse of Madagascar's government. Will Morocco learn from the mistakes of its fellow African nation or repeat them and meet the same fate? Now that remains to be seen. And moving on, let's turn our attention to the US visa bond program, which is making it difficult for Africans to travel to the United States. The Trump administration has expanded the controversial program. It has added Gambia to the list of countries whose nationals must pay bonds of up to $15,000 to enter the United States. Gambian nationals will face the new rules starting from the 11th of October. Now, last month, Zambia and Malawi became the first countries to face US visa bonds. The Trump administration introduced the visa bond program as a part of its larger crackdown on immigration. The 12-month pilot program started on the 20th of August, and it affects business and tourism visas. As per US authorities, the visa bond program targets travelers from countries with historically higher rates of visa overstays. Under the program, the travelers from the enlisted countries must pay a bond of $5,000, $10,000 or $15,000. The amount to be paid is determined at the time of the visa interview. Travelers who have paid the bond must enter and exit the US through designated ports of entry, and paying a bond does not guarantee visa issuance. However, the bond is fully refundable if the applicant abides by all the rules, such as departing the US on or before their authorized stay ends and not traveling before the visa expires, or being denied admission at a US port of entry. Now, this is not the first time that President Trump has rolled out such a program. Visa bonds were first tried in 2020, but it was not fully implemented because of a decrease in global travel during the COVID-19 pandemic. Though the bond is refundable under certain conditions, it does place an extra financial burden on travelers from Gambia, Malawi, and Zambia who seek to visit the US for business and tourism. Traveling to the United States is already a pricey prospect. Critics have pointed out that the newly imposed bonds put travel to the US further out of reach for residents of poorer countries. As per the latest US report on visa overstays, both Malawi and Zambia had relatively high visa overstay rates at 14.3% and 11.1% respectively. But both of them are smaller countries with relatively few tourism or business-related arrivals in the US. Moreover, the number of visa overstays by nationals from these countries is far less than those from more populous countries like Brazil and Colombia. Be it steep tariffs, tough trade deal negotiations, or visa restrictions, President Trump is targeting African nations left, right, and center as Washington expands travel restrictions to more and more African nations. The chances of realizing the American dream become less for many African nationals. And moving on to our last story, in Namibia, massive wildfires have destroyed about a third of the Etosha National Park, a popular tourist destination known for its wildlife. The blaze at the wildlife reserve started a week ago. It spread beyond the park, burning hundreds of thousands of hectares of grazing pasture in regions bordering Angola. Namibia's Environment Minister says the fire has now been contained, but the full extent of the destruction is not yet clear. At least 9 antelope and 1 elephant have been confirmed killed in the fire. Authorities say the blaze may have been caused by charcoal production activity on commercial farms near the park. Strong winds and dry vegetation helped the fire to spread rapidly, threatening biodiversity, wildlife, and the livelihoods of the local communities. Namibia deployed at least 500 soldiers to battle the fire. The government says the soldiers will remain deployed in case of a flare-up. Now, the Etosha National Park is one of Africa's largest game reserves. It is a top tourist destination in southern Africa. The park is home to 114 mammal species, including the critically endangered black rhinoceros. It features the ancient Etosha salt pan, which is visible from space, and it also attracts large flocks of migratory flamingos during the rainy season. The full extent of damage and the total number of animal casualties will be determined by aerial surveys, but roughly 34% of the park has been affected, raising fears that the death toll may be higher. Opposition parties have criticized the government for failing to contain the fire, saying that authorities should have been better prepared and urging stronger long-term response measures. Experts note that the wildfires occur naturally in arid savanna ecosystems and can be beneficial when managed, helping to maintain healthy habitats. But when left unchecked, these fires threaten not only the park's unique wildlife and biodiversity, but also the livelihoods of the communities who depend on these ecosystems. And that's it on the show for today. We will see you again tomorrow at the same time. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.
Straight into the roof of the net. Nice one. Straight down the middle. So a good performance.
Hi, you're watching Firstpost. I'm Rupa Ramani. Let's get started. Mohsin Naqvi's threats continue, but will BCCI blink? That's coming up. Doesn't look like it. All the inside track on this developing story, and who is the man who seems to be holding cricket for ransom? We bring you the story of the rise of Pakistan's Home Minister and PCB boss Mohsin Naqvi. Nepal may be in the middle of crisis, but one bunch seems to be the silver lining in all the gloom.